How's it going, everybody? Today, we're going to finalize our education on the planetary days, the color coordination, with the last video being Jupiter. Today's video is Jupiter, Jophiel, and Hismael, a physics-conscious theology of planetary magic, color, gravity, and sacred amplification here. There's a few additional things with Jupiter because of how expansive the energy itself represents. In this final video of our education, what follows is best understood as a research-style synthesis rather than a proof. A way of placing astronomy, optics, contemplative psychology, general relativity, and religious esoteric symbolism into one disciplined conversation without pretending they are the same exact language. They are separate, but disciplined. Jupiter in astronomy is the fifth planet from the Sun, the largest planet in the solar system, and a giant world with a powerful magnetic field generated in part by electrically conducted liquid metallic hydrogen deep below its clouds. That physical picture already gives us a useful symbolic frame for why Jupiter has so often been associated with vastness, law, kingship, expansion, power, and protection. Even before theology enters the room, Jupiter is a planetary image of scale, field, reach, and ordered force. Its magnitude alone is astronomical. In Western occult tradition, Jupiter is not treated only as a planet, but as a layered current of intelligence and operation. On a surviving magical disk in a British museum, Jupiter is explicitly linked with the angel Jophiel, the intelligence Jophiel or Jophiel, and the spirit or demon, whatever you want to call him, Hismael. Related later tables and occult handbooks preserve the same broad distinction between a higher, beneficial, ordering intelligence and a lower, more immediate operative spirit. In that traditional framework, Jophiel represents Jupiter's harmonizing, wise, luminous, and judicial aspects, while Hismael represents the denser and more forceful side of jovial power, the side that can enact, compel, enlarge, and, if unbalanced, inflate. Historically, this is theology and ritual symbolism, not laboratory physics, but it is internally coherent. I got tongue-tied there, sorry guys. Jupiter is not only blessing, but amplified consequence. The numerology of Jupiter's magic square expresses the same idea in number. Jupiter's kamea is a 4x4 square using the numbers 1 through 16. Each row, column, and major diagonal sums to 34, and the total of all numbers equals 136 for 136. 4 in many symbolic systems suggests order, throne, stability, law, and establishment. 16 extends the ordering principle into a fuller matrix. Now 36 becomes a signature sum of balanced jovial distribution, and 136 becomes the totalized field. That is why the Jupiter square has often been used not merely as ornament, but as a diagram of lawful increase. Not chaos, not random luck, but enlargement under a pattern. If we move from number to color, scientific precision is going to matter here. Blue is a spectral band in visible light at roughly 450 to 495 nanometers, or 4,500 to 4,950 angstroms. Now, yellow, which I am contrasting yellow and blue. Sometimes I just wear blue, sometimes I wear yellow and blue, sometimes I just wear yellow. And on a very rare occasion, when I'm doing angelic work, I will wear purple on Thursdays to signify my connection on the meta with the angelic presences of Jupiter and the more luck, godly, divinity-based energies of Jupiter. Now, yellow, depending on how one maps the visible range, sits roughly around 560 to 630 nanometers, or 5,600 to 6,300 angstroms. Purple, however, should be treated carefully here. In spiritual or angelic work, it can be a powerful symbol, but is better understood as a perceptual or artistic composite rather than one single simple spectral band in the way that blue or yellow is. So, if somebody says that they are channeling the angstroms of Jupiter through blue, yellow, or purple, the most scientifically defensible statement is this. Blue and yellow can be used as optical anchors, and anchors is the reason that we wear the colors. They are physical anchors tying us to the spiritual intent and meaning therein too, rather than tied to measurable wavelength ranges. While purple should be used more symbolically here, especially in devotional or angelic contexts. Physics can describe the light. The symbolic system gives you the light meaning. That distinction matters because it keeps the contemplative claim honest here. And honest and genuine intentions is what we need to incorporate into our work. Because we can't go into it like half-assed, if you will. You need to genuinely indulge into it. You need to genuinely want to do the work. You have to actually take charge and anchor yourself into your practice, especially when you're doing alchemy and internal alchemy and channeling energies. You can't just simply walk the shoes because you want to. You need to embody it, and I do it 24/7. I don't diverge. I incorporate it into a normal life and my spiritual practice. So when I'm at work, I have my colors. They are my garbs. Outside of work, I have my colors. It is part of my ritual, but it is also me living day-to-day life as a normal human being, if you will. But it also allows me to maintain that constant anchor to my spiritual practice as I'm going about my normality, while I also focus on my spirituality. So it's like two birds with one stone. Now, there's no accepted scientific model here showing that blue, yellow, or purple light opens a measurable communications channel to Jophiel or Hismael. What science can say is that the color is a real physical perceptual event, that visual focus changes attention, and that meditation can also alter our awareness, as I've stated many times in other videos. It's emotional regulation and the salience of symbols. So if one builds a Jupiter practice around blue and yellow or around purple in an angelic register, the most defensible account is that these colors act as sensory and symbolic cues that help organize consciousness around jovial themes. Expansion with order, hope with law, confidence with ethics, leadership with restraint, and abundance with responsibility. In spiritual language, this can be described as opening to Jupiter. We are opening the self while drawing in the energies. It is a focused attentional protocol shaped by color, expectation, prayer, and ritual framing. For me, every minute of the day is part of the ritual. I live, breathe, eat, work, go through, focus, worry, distract, multitask on a ritual. I'm always doing something in the meta in my head as a mental practice, a mental exercise. It helps keep me grounded. It helps me regulate my emotions, regulate my thoughts. It allows me to think about thinking before I think about what I want to say or do. It allows me to have that internal pause and weigh pros and cons, consequences, and potential variables that might deviate from whatever objective that I have in mind. Now, my favorite phrase, as I've used before, is the quantum lattice field. Again, this needs to be handled with equal discipline. In mainstream physics, quantum field theory is the framework that explains the behavior of subatomic particles and their interactions through various fields. It does not establish that consciousness can tune into named planetary beings by wavelength selection or faith alone. So, make sure we understand that. That's going to be the basis for that. This is more of a faith-based driven practice rather than comprehension, but it's a mesh of the two worlds. Therefore, if we use quantum lattice field here, we should use it as a contemplative metaphor rather than an established physical mechanism. In that metaphor, reality is experienced as an interconnected matrix of information and relation. Faith acts as a stabilizing carrier. Focus is going to act as our selective tuning. Repetition is going to strengthen the signal. This is not experimentally validated occult physics here, though. It is a disciplined, spiritual, psychological model for understanding why symbolic meditation can feel structured, relational, and revelatory to the practitioner. If one wants a computer control analogy, which is kind of like my favorite because I view the brain as a hyper quantum computer. It's a living, organic thinking mechanism that computes at a billion times a billion processes a second as far as capability goes. It is a quantum computer hardwired into our body, ran by nerves, which would be the our electrical system in there. Jupiter practice can be described as input-output form. An input includes Thursday timing, prayer, blue or yellow light, purple as a symbolic devotional color where desired, the Jupiter square, the names Jophiel and Hismael, and a clearly defined ethical aim. You need to be concise, clear, and coherent when you're speaking to the quantum space, because it does not deviate from that which is said, which is why they say watch what you wish for. It is because if you leave something that is verbally open to interpretation, well, considering probability, amplitude, and the quantum space and the individual possibilities of all variables, the quantum space is going to interpret it based off of your current energy. And if it's not in favor of your highest good, the quantum space is going to draw in, through law of attraction, the variable possibility in which you are resonating with. It's all about electrical draw. It's, tug and pull. So if you're down here tugging and pulling, those are the energies and variable possibilities you are going to pull in based off your amplification of said energy. Now, if you're resonating high with a raise your vibe, you are going to, on a quantum level, draw in more higher valuable possibilities because you are resonating on a higher level frequency rather than a lesser. These would be the lesser keys, and these would be the higher keys, if you will. Now, justice, increase, wisdom, or lawful success is going to be those ethical, defined aim that we would be drawing into us. Now, the processing layer is going to include attention regulation, emotional expectancy, autobiographical memory, moral filtering, symbolic association, and bodily calm. The output is not magical electricity in the crude sense, if you will, but a shift in cognition and conduct. Broader perspective, stronger confidence, clearer statement, strategic judgment, greater generosity. That's not just a monetary thing, so please don't confuse generous, the term, with the perceived monetary inclusion. And more mature optimism. And a better ability to think in systems rather than impulses. These are things that we do out of spite, out of anger, tit for tat, if you will. These are things that we stop, think, contemplate, even if it's a split second. We have that difference in when we think about it and when we take action that greatly and drastically alters the path that you end up on between impulse and strategic thought. Now, the feedback loop is going to be behavior and reality testing. If the practice is sound, it should not merely produce sensations of grandeur. It should produce better judgment, better stewardship, and more truthful use of power. Truthful use of power is going to be important here because people that are unbalanced in their Jupiter energy and their jovial being, they're going to be the ones abusing their power, abusing their role, abusing their connections, abusing their money, abusing their friends, abusing their family. They're going to be the 5 pillars of negative tactics in correlation to human connection and being. It's not a sustainable energy to be in. It is collapsing inevitably at some point. It's not if, it's when. Now, in spiritual language, that is communion with benevolent, jovial intelligence. In psychological language, it is disciplined, cognitive, emotional entrainment around a symbolically rich archetype. The gods and goddesses associated with Jupiter here reinforce this field of meaning. In Roman religion, Jupiter, or Jove, or Jove, if you will, is the chief god, a sky deity tied to law, treaties, alliances, and public order. Now, my favorite sky god is Shamash, Mesopotamian lore, but he represents similar aspects. Now, Jupiter is explicitly linked with Juno and Minerva in the Capitoline triad. The Roman Jupiter was identified with the Greek Zeus and Juno with Hera. Those associations matter because they show that Jupiter's symbolism is not merely about luck or wealth, but about sovereignty, oath, social legitimacy, and ordered expansion. The jovial current is therefore beneficent when it protects law, generosity, right kingship, abundance, and moral authority. That's an emphasized phrase there. Moral authority. It becomes dangerous when it swells into pride, domination, and entitlement. We all know who they are. Overextension, indulgence, inflated certainty, hyper-egotistical. In astrological tradition, Jupiter is often called benefic. But even benefic force can become malefic when amplification outruns wisdom. It's like the saying, he had the wits about him, but wisdom was too fast. He could not keep up. That dualism is exactly where karmic and dharmic readings become useful here in this section of the teaching. The dharmic side of Jupiter is growth under moral law, justice, magnanimity, learning, protection, faith, opportunity, patronage, abundance, and the widening of life through right order. The karmic shadow is excess, too much appetite, too much certainty, too much inflation, too much trust in one's own immunity that could just be self-perceived and doesn't actually exist. We only feel important, but we're not actually. Or the temptation to confuse divine favor with personal superiority, and that's a dangerous one for a lot of people. This is why Jupiter can feel like the season after Job, but never the cheap version of reward. In symbolic theology, the Job-like season strips, humbles, limits, and tests. Then Jupiter arrives not simply as more in the abundant sense, but as lawful increase after refinement. In this sense, jovial harvest is not merely abundance. It is abundance that can finally be carried without self-destruction or self-sabotage. That is also why Jophiel and Hismael can be read together. And one teaches how to expand rightly. The other warns what raw amplified force does when not subordinated to wisdom. So if you just continuously enter karmic cycles and repeat cycles, but you don't learn from those cycles, it's going to be destructive by every sense of the word at the end of it. Now, general relativity is something that I like to correlate with Jupiter here because it adds one final but important cautious metaphor to jovial energy. Now, according to general relativity, mass curves space-time, and clocks run more slowly in stronger gravitational fields. That is a real physics effect here, measured and foundational to modern precision timing. But it does not mean that spiritual manifestation occurs because one has literally manipulated gravity through prayer or color frequency. The most honest use of relativity here is analogical, of course. Jupiter as a symbol of immense scale and gravitational authority reminds us that large realities change timing, pacing, delay, and consequence. In the human experience of prayer and disciplined attention, this can feel like manifestation because a person begins to align their behavior, their expectation, and moral will around a larger order contained within. The physics remains physics. The spirituality reading remains spiritual. Now the bridge is meaning, not misuse of equations here. So speaking on Jupiter, I can responsibly say this. Jupiter in astronomy is a giant world of field, mass, reach, and structure. In religious history, it becomes a sign of sovereignty, which is Lilith energy, which we all need to get in touch with and embody, law, blessing, and oath. In occult tradition, it gives the names Jophiel and Hismael to distinguish a higher order intelligence from a more forceful, operative spirit. In color work, it can be approached through blue and yellow as measurable visual anchors, and purple as a devotional symbolic hue. In contemplative practice, it can be modeled through an input-output architecture of attention, symbol, prayer, and ethical action. And in metaphysical reflection, it offers both benevolent and dangerous lessons. It can bless, enlarge, protect, and enrich. But on the lesser end, it can also inflate, blind, and overextend. That is the true jovial mystery, not the power of good. But that power becomes good only when it is structured by law, humbled by time, and oriented towards something greater than the self. Hopefully you guys found these teachings entertaining. I know for a lot of people who are always like, hey, why do you wear the colors that you do? This explains it. Could also give you a new perspective. I know it works for me. It helps. I feel like it does change the people around me. I've noticed a huge difference no matter where I go. It's like I elevate the mood just by existing in the room. And it makes a significant difference. Like when I'm at work, when I'm around like the old people or whatever, like their mood like is significantly elevated just by my presence. Because I'm present, I'm fun, I'm focused, I'm disciplined, but I'm also goofy myself without concern of external opinions or influence. I am always unapologetically myself without concern. So hopefully you guys enjoyed these teachings. I'll see you in the next video.